Hey folks, welcome to Mindful MX365. I'm Justin McBride, and this is the daily series where we consider quotes, concepts, and contradictions that can support us on our journey of experiencing life mindfully. Before we get to today's consideration, for those that are watching or listening, you might notice that this looks or sounds a little different. That's because I had a different episode that was planned for today. However, we've had some recent events that I think are definitely worth considering on Mindful MX365. And as I was getting ready to do this episode, I realized that there's the potential barriers that come along with the technical requirements associated with filming or recording the podcast and the video how I normally do it. And not barriers that I can't overcome, but barriers that will get in the way, that could get in the way of me being fully present and considering today's topic. Today's consideration is the idea or the concept of after the storm. I think when we hear storm, that might bring up different emotions. So to make sure we're on the same page, when I say storm, I mean extreme circumstances, extreme events. And specifically, the storm or the extreme event that I'm talking about is what unfolded in Washington, D.C., at the United States Capitol building yesterday as I record this, and when I'll post it as well. And before we get into considering after the storm, I do want to take just about 15 to 30 seconds to practice a little intentional breathing to make sure I can be fully present and my mind can be ready to consider the topic. And if this isn't normally your thing, or it's a little too out there or woo-woo, as some people would say, I promise you all I'm doing is breathing. And science can back it up. Sports medicine can back up. Many different things can back up the benefits of intentional breath. So I do encourage you to join me for just a few intentional breaths. Pause whatever it is you're doing. If you're listening to this or watching it while something else is going on, just take a moment to not be with me, but be with your breath. So I'm going to close my eyes. As I close my eyes, I normally do a couple quick breaths in and out. Before starting my first intentional breath in, I encourage you to go at your own pace, but be intentional about the pace. If you'd like, join along with me. I'm going to breathe in for 5 seconds, hold it for a few seconds, and then let it out over 5 seconds. I'll get us going in the first one, and then we can do a few on our own. First breath in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And out, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breath in. And out. 2 more completely on our own. As you finish your intentional breathing, become aware of where you're at. If your eyes are closed, maybe you feel the sun or the light against your eyelids. You hear the birds chirping or the coffee brewer brewing. Open your eyes, look around, and take a moment to recognize where you're at. Now, just so you know, there may or may not be a little bit more dead space in this video or this episode of a podcast, if that's how you're listening to it. There also might be times where I correct myself. I'm not sure. But basically, I've committed myself to being as authentic and fully in this moment as I can, which means not giving myself the opportunity to edit later. And by that, it allows me to really consider now, because I'm the kind of person, when I edit a video myself or I edit a podcast myself, when I am the person that is the subject of it, I have the tendency to edit as I go along in the recording. So I'm not going to edit after the fact. So I just need to take my time and be present with my thoughts as I'm considering them. So yesterday, and just so you know, I'm not planning on going deep into the events that unfolded yesterday at the Capitol building, the specific actions that were taken. I'm more going to spend time focusing on the events that occurred inside me, emotionally and cognitively, and perhaps with many of you, and some that maybe were even there. Yesterday, I remember sitting down, and I was talking to a friend on the phone, and I was starting to do some work on the computer and getting some things done and being productive. And I opened my phone to look at a few things, and some of what I do does involve other things on the internet and other social media platforms. And as I was pulling some of those up, I saw what was going on, starting to go on. And I was like, that's interesting. And so I took a few seconds to try to be aware of what was going on without being consumed by that. And this is something I try to do on a daily basis, even with like things like email, where I open up my inbox. And I don't necessarily need to open up everything that is in my inbox, but I just want to be aware of what's there, right? Just recognize that it's there so I can kind of be prepared for what lies ahead, and I can control, or I can decide when I'm going to respond to those. And same thing. I was like, I want to just like kind of scroll just for a second, scroll. I'm not going to open, just kind of see what's going on. So I scroll just a little bit, see a few things. I'm like, all right, this is interesting. And then I went back to what I was doing for a little bit, and my friend and I were talking, and I mentioned it, and we talked briefly. And then it came up again. And I remember there was a point where I saw enough that I was like, I think something's going on. So I read an article and I looked at a few things, and I decided, well, before I decided, I had to ask myself a question. I asked myself, do I want to turn on the TV? And this was a literal question I asked myself. Do I really want to turn on the TV? And this was inside my head. Sometimes this could be a metaphorical question before you engage in a consuming media or engaging in a conversation or an idea. Do I want to turn on the TV? Right? Do I want to go down that road? And looking back, I am proud of myself for asking that. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. I'm very proud that I asked that question. Do I want to? In the past, I might not have done that. I probably would not have done that. I probably would have said, oh my gosh, look at all this is going on. I have to see this. I need to see this. And I just would have turned or opened up my phone, an app, and started reading and scrolling, and I'd have videos, and I'd have a tablet over here, and my phone here, and a TV here, and I'd have multiple TV or programs going. But I didn't do that initially. I asked myself. And I do think that one of the reasons I asked myself is I was aware of the initial response of my body and my physical self, like what's happening as you start to feel anxious or you start to feel a certain way. Chemicals do get released in your body, right? And you start to feel something. Maybe your heart pounds a little bit more, your fists clench up a little bit. You do that. And I recognized that in that moment. And I recognized what was happening enough to be that, okay, well, this could be a thing that leads me down a certain path that do I want to be in this moment? I do have things that I want to get done today. Emotionally, is this a place I want to be? But I asked myself that question. And ultimately, I decided, yes, I want to turn on the TV, or I felt it, excuse me, I felt it appropriate to turn on the TV. I didn't really want to turn on the TV because I do also remember thinking, like, I know if I turn this on, I'm not going to accomplish what all that I set out for in this day. But I did consider what it is that was ahead of me to do for the day and whether or not it had to be accomplished in the day. And I still decided, yes, I'm going to turn on the TV. And it's something that I want to be present for. And I did have this little struggle back and forth for a moment of, well, should I not? And then I even realized, like, I was kind of judging myself for considering it. And then I had to check in again, and just remind myself very quickly, like, Justin, mindfulness is about non-judgmental awareness of internal and external factors. I say that again. Mindfulness, and as we define it here at MindfulX and at Social Profit Initiative, the organization behind MindfulX, mindfulness is the non-judgmental awareness of internal and external factors. And so I'm like, one, Justin, don't judge yourself right now, right? Or try not to judge yourself. And I just kind of had that internal dialogue and noting that I was judging myself. Which is kind of a fun dialogue to have with yourself, especially as you practice mindfulness a little bit more. And you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm judging myself about judging myself. But really, at the heart of mindfulness, it is the awareness. So don't worry so much in those moments of like, oh, am I really being mindful right now? Well, mindfulness is the awareness, right? It's not the perfection of non-judgment. It's not the perfection, if you're in a meditation, of having no thought and just focusing on your breath. It is the awareness of when you stray outside of that. And the TV comes on. So the TV comes on, and the events that unfolded, and again, I'm not going to get too much into them, but they were pretty extreme. They were really extreme. And as someone who practices mindfulness, as someone who is former active duty military, I served in the Marine Corps during a time of combat. All of these things were baggage, or I don't even know what I would call them. Baggage seems, the word baggage comes with a lot of baggage, but they're all things that I brought to the conversation, the things that I brought to that moment. And I just remember watching and being very disheartened. And that my initial thought was just kind of like, oh, this is like kind of gross, as I saw things, and not the emotions that I saw. I just want to be clear. I'm not judging emotion and the feelings of people in those moments. I do want to be also clear that I don't accept what happened, or I don't think what happened was acceptable. But I'm not judging the emotions that led to that moment. But I just remember being disgusted at like the actions more than the emotions. Windows being broken, people being assaulted, law enforcement being overrun. And initially, before it got to kind of that point, and I just saw people pushing through barricades, I just kind of dismissed it. I was like, oh, it's, whatever. It's another one of these things people are getting riled up about, like they're going overboard. And I didn't dismiss the severity of pushing over a barrier or the severity of their emotions that brought them to that moment. But I just remember dismissing, like, oh, it's whatever, in a little bit, they're going to stop and it's not going to get any further. But it didn't. And it kept going and it kept going. And the storm, because that's today's consideration, after the storm, And the storm in this moment, that extreme event, was not just the storm that happened, the extreme event that happened, the windows that were broken, the barriers that were knocked down, the trash cans that were thrown into doorways. Those were extreme. Equally as extreme, I think, were my emotions, and likely many of your emotions that occurred during all of this. And I just remember, let's take a step back beyond just the extreme emotion, just the extreme response. Because when I look at mindfulness, again as that awareness, right? And awareness. To be aware means to recognize that we are a physical being, that we are a cognitive being, and we are an emotional being, right? So whatever religious or cultural background you have, I think we can all agree that we are a physical self, a cognitive self, and an emotional self. And they have different functions, right? And all of those were going through, I guess, a storm yesterday, in addition to the storm that was going on at the Capitol. And the cognitive thought of just processing everything that was going on, like literally what was going on, and not just emotionally, but like what was actually happening. And it was so insane to me that all of this was occurring. That's what I remember. And then like that brought in my emotion, and because I like insane, okay, let's take a moment, just, consider that, am I judging? And I do have this struggle. And if you are somebody who practices mindfulness and awareness in a non-judgmental capacity, I assume, or I bet you too struggle sometimes with the judgment piece, and like, am I judging? And I do, and I remember taking a step back to say, Justin, you're not judging right now, you're evaluating, right? You're evaluating what's going on. So for those of you that are maybe not a practicer, or you're not too much into the world of mindfulness or meditation, I don't want you to think that when I practice meditation or mindfulness, I would be somebody in the middle of a battlefield, sitting, in lotus, my eyes closed, just breathing. No, that's not presence. Like, awareness and presence are two key components of mindfulness, right? Being aware. To be aware, you need to be present. To be present, you need to be present. So you're not just going to be sitting there blindly, blind to what's going on, right? You can't be present if you're doing that. Does that mean you need to allow every emotion to take control? I don't think so. I definitely don't. However, sometimes you do need to be present in that moment and be fully present. To be fully present is to be physically in that moment, right? So take, for instance, the battlefield, or combat zones, which I have been in when I was in the Marine Corps. To be fully present there would be to physically be there, right? I'm actually there. To cognitively be there. To be present in a way that allows me to see everything going on. To see the individual with a gun, or an individual perhaps with a remote that may be connected to an explosive device. That means to be present cognitively. Emotionally, to be present means to be aware of my emotions, not to not have any emotions, but to be aware of my emotions. And through all of this, non-judgmentally, to non-judgmentally be aware of my emotions. Because if I'm emotional, it can't be emotional, let's choose another word. If I am, as it relates to my emotions, unhinged, right? I let my emotions to kind of go free, then I'm not able to be cognitively present and physically present in the way that would be most appropriate in that situation. If I am judging my emotions, if I am judging the emotions and the intent of others, and not evaluating, but judging, then how can I truly be present for them? and a cognitive sense where I'm evaluating what's going on. Because as soon as I place judgment on something, I say this is right, this is wrong. And that's different than this is safe, this is not safe. This is something that's a survival thing, right? Safety. So presence and awareness non-judgmentally means I'm not going to judge it. I can evaluate it, but I'm not going to say, like, this is right or wrong. I'm just going to say, is it safe or not safe? And in that emotion, I can, in recognizing the emotion, I can recognize when my emotions are safe or not safe. When my emotions are allowing me to get so focused on this is wrong and I'm right here, right? And everything else, you're right here and you're ignoring everything else around you. You don't see anything else. Well, little do you know, there could have been something in danger here or here. And so as it relates to a combat zone or a metaphorical combat zone of the chaos that sometimes is life, we don't want to be focused right here, right? We want to be a little bit more broad in our focus. You want to see everything else because that will allow us to evaluate it. And that is mindfulness to me. Mindfulness is being aware of all of those factors that are external and internal. And one little analogy or metaphor before we depart, because I know I've been rambling a little bit. I can see we're at 20 something minutes right now. So I'll kind of start to wrap it up. One more little thing is when I think of mindfulness, I like to think of it as it relates to an autopilot system. An autopilot system in a plane is quite helpful. It keeps you on track. It helps you, get from point A to point B without having to control each and everything. However, there are times when it is appropriate to take it off autopilot. There are times when it's appropriate to just sit and be aware of what's going on in the cockpit. There's a reason why pilots sit in the cockpit, even though the autopilot system is going to do most of what the plane needs to do, because you need that awareness of all internal and external factors. And by being aware of everything going on in the cockpit and outside the cockpit, the pilots can make adjustments and provide input that the autopilot system can use to course correct. Mindfulness to me is that awareness. It's that awareness of what is going on. It's not controlling the autopilot, because we do have an autopilot that goes on in our head that I don't think we can really control. We can be aware of the autopilot. We can be aware of internal and external factors. And in the awareness of them, in the awareness of these factors, we provide the autopilot with extra data, with more relevant data that it can use to more appropriately guide us. That awareness, that input to the autopilot system, that's mindfulness to me. So after the storm, during the storm, be aware of these emotions. We don't necessarily want to rehash the emotions and rehash everything that goes on. We can evaluate it responsibly, intentionally, in a way that has like meaning, but just spewing hate and venom to ourselves and to others, as we rehash everything all the time that happens, is typically not going to be effective. So intentionally evaluate situations, mindfully be present for the emotion as you evaluate what happened. Ask yourself about the emotions that went into what happened. What led people to feel certain things were necessary? And then act. Don't just sit silently on the battlefield with your eyes closed meditating. Act, right? Mindfulness is a key component of my life. It is not all of my life. It is a foundational component to how I approach it. But after that mindfulness, or with that mindfulness, comes intention, comes compassion, comes authenticity, comes my desire to do good. I don't want to go too much into anything else because I could go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and I want to respect your time, and I appreciate you for giving me the platform, the opportunity to share this with you and to talk it out. And I just want you to know that you have the opportunity to talk it out with those that you care about. Because when we talk it out loud in a respectful manner, it's not so powerful anymore. Even just discussing this right now, I feel like the emotions that were kind of pretty strong from yesterday are a little bit more mellow, appropriate, I guess. If you don't have somebody that you can discuss things with, or even discuss the concept of mindfulness, not discuss the specifics of your life, but just how to experience life mindfully, we have a platform called MindfulX, which you can access at www.mindfulx.net. This is a free from advertisement, free to sign up for platform. We're not trying to get you to pay for anything. We're simply providing a platform for people to share and find guidance and be inspired as it pertains to experiencing life mindfully. A place for people to be intentional about being mindful and about promoting their mindful practice. So head on over to www.mindfulx.net. It will ask you to create a login because this is a network that's closed off from anything else. You're not going to have to worry about being pulled in one direction or another. And after yesterday and after the past year, it's nice to have that space where you can just kind of scroll more intentionally, especially if you're wanting to practice mindfulness, or maybe you just want to see how others engage in mindfulness. So feel free to head on over there. I hope to continue the conversation with you right over there. Until next time, remember, mindfulness is only a few intentional breaths away. As we depart, you're welcome to log off, hit the pause button, stop at any moment. I'm going to practice maybe a minute or so of intentional breathing. You're welcome to join with me at the end. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to let the video or the podcast end. That way you can continue on as long as you like. I'm going to sit upright, making sure my head is placed above my shoulders. I'm going to take a deep breath in for 5 seconds. And exhale for 5. Take a breath in for 5 seconds. And out. Continue breathing on your own, perhaps turning the focus to where you feel your breath the most. Perhaps you feel the breath as it enters your mouth, the coolness of the air or the warmth of the air as it passes over your tongue or the roof of your mouth. Maybe you feel your breath as your chest expands. Maybe you feel it most as it exits your body. As you focus on your breathing, it's okay to note when your focus leaves the breath. Maybe you start thinking about what happened in the past, what could potentially happen in the future, or you're somewhere else still in the present moment, but not on your breath. It's okay to recognize that. That's mindfulness, being aware of that distraction non-judgmentally. Make a mental note of distraction, and then come back to your breath as it enters your mouth fills your lungs and leaves your body. And continue your breathing. It is in this practice of mindfulness and mindful breathing and meditation that we can prepare for our everyday lives and bring these moments of mindfulness of where we're at, being present in the moment, and recognize when we're not present in the moment in a non-judgmental way, and simply coming back to the present moment. But it all begins with the awareness of where we're at, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Let's go ahead and take another intentional breath in for 5 seconds. Hold it and release it for 5. Breath in. And out. And in. And out. Now on our own.